Today, you are going to get a front row seat to the breakdown of how the Springboks beat Scotland in a Rugby World Cup pool match in Marseille. I'll be joined by rugby writer and the sports journalist who most recently angered Eddie Jones, Ken Borland. Ken, welcome to Front Row Rugby.
Thanks very much, Peter. Just a small correction there. I wasn't the most recent journalist to anger Eddie. He was angered by his entire press corps subsequent to our little contretemps in Pretoria. He told them all to give themselves an uppercut and said it's the worst press conference he's ever been at. I've been demoted a bit, which is a little bit sad.
There might be about 15 guys ahead of you now, Ken. So on that note, let's get started then with that Springboks Scotland fixture. As it turns out, it was actually South Africa's first opening match win at a Rugby World Cup since 2011. How relieved will Jock Nenaber be with that 18-3 win?
I think very. Going into the World Cup, they always highlighted that game as being absolutely critical. And it was, because the losers of that game now have to beat Ireland basically to progress to the quarterfinals, which no one wants that pressure hanging over your head, to have to beat the world's number one side to qualify. And I think his feelings of anxiety would have only been increased by what happened in that first half. The Springboks only going into the break 6-3 up. So it was really nip and tuck in that first half. Nenaber will be very relieved in the second half that they got things right and managed to convert their dominance into points.
It was quite interesting, Ken. I was watching a bit of British and Irish media in the aftermath of the match, and the feeling that I got from them was that Scotland were the better team in the first half, and they were calling it a game of two halves. But by my score, Scotland only entered our 22 for the first time after 25 minutes. I actually thought we were fairly comfortable, except for maybe the last 10 minutes of the first half. Was I watching a different match?
You were watching the same match that I did, I think. I agree. I think the Springboks certainly dominated that first half in terms of territory and possession, but their conversion rate was really poor inside Scottish territory. I suppose you could argue that Scotland maybe looked a little bit more dangerous with ball in hand. A couple of times they did enter Springbok territory. They definitely caused problems, beat the rush defence a couple of times. So they had a better conversion rate than the Springboks. But I think in terms of dominance and just who looked the stronger side, it was the Springboks in that first half. Although you had that nagging sort of fear that the longer it went on like this, Scotland had the ability to get a couple of breakaway tries, and then they would have been tough to beat.
And then speaking of the last 10 minutes of the first half, as I say, for me, that's when Scotland probably had their best period in the match. They won one or two scrums against us as well. Frans Malherbe on the receiving end of one of those. But except for that, I thought that our pack looked really, really comfortable against them. What do you say?
Yeah, I agree, Peter. In that first half, the first couple of scrum penalties went the Springboks' way, and then there was that change in momentum, as you said, just before half-time. The lineouts, the Springboks were very secure in putting Scotland under pressure. The collisions, South Africa were getting across the gain line more. So, the Springbok pack did look like they had Scotland's number. It was just the rounding off that was the issue. And then obviously in that second half, the Springbok pack lifted it up a gear and really dominated.
Now, I'm not sure about you, but Jasper Visser is a man who hasn't always convinced me in the number 8 jersey for the Springboks. But in my opinion, yesterday, he had his best game to date in a Bok jersey. Some of the carries, the tackles, the work at the breakdown, and a special mention on that clean-out that ultimately led to Manie Libbok setting up Kurtley Arendse for that try. What's your assessment of Visser?
You're going to have to get another guest on your podcast, Peter, because we just agree with each other too much. I mean, I agree with you. I mean, Jasper Visser, I thought that was definitely his best game for the Springboks this year. He seemed a little bit off colour in previous games, but he was very good against Scotland. I felt brought that physical presence, carried the ball strongly, was a nuisance at the breakdowns. So great to see him find some form again.
I might need a Kiwi or someone from the Northern Hemisphere here to strongly disagree with what I have to say, Ken. So let's talk a little bit about Marnie Lebok. We mentioned there that beautiful cross kick to set up Kurtley Arendse, and he did have a good game. He was actually named man of the match, but the goal kicking, a bit of a concern again, 2 out of 5 yesterday. What's your take?
Yeah, Marnie battled a bit in that first half, and also, some of the game management, both him and Faf de Klerk, because, it's not just Marnie who's in charge of that. So, some of the kicking wasn't always as accurate as the Springboks would have wanted it to be. But he definitely grew into the game and started to boss proceedings in that second half. I love the way he gets our backline going. I love, that moment of magic with the cross kick, just absolute perfection, straight into Kurtley Arendse's arms, and he wasn't even looking, Marnie Lebok, which was absolutely superb. I think, and it's been said by people like Nick Mallett and Butch James, or no, not Butch James, sorry, Schalk Burger. In that first half, I think the Springboks should have kicked for touch more than kicking for poles. They were tough kicks for Marnie Lebok. Long kicks, angled kicks, and if you miss those, suddenly you're on a bit of a down in terms of confidence right from the start. I think it would be better for the Springboks to kick those to touch, get their pack going, get the rolling maul going, really build that physical dominance, and you might get a try from the maul or one of the variations we have around the maul. Or you could get an even easier penalty for Lebok to kick if that's your goal, to build the scoreboard pressure. So I think they need to look at that in terms of decision making on the field. Let's kick into the corners like we did against the All Blacks at Twickenham, put them under severe pressure. That way you can also get yellow cards. It's like a snowball effect. You get the referee on your side. Overall, very pleased with Lebok that, in the end, he had a very good game, and a moment that, he'll obviously cherish forever.
Do you really know your rugby? Do you always get your predictions right? Why not make some money then? Open an account right now with Tic Tac Bets and get up to 2,000 Rand and 20 spins with your first deposit. The link is appearing on your screen, and I'll also put it in the description area. Please note that this is an affiliate link and I will make a little commission on it. Winners know when to stop. National Responsible Gambling Program. Toll-free helpline 0800 006 008. No persons under the age of 18 years are permitted to gamble. And then speaking of the way that we play, often the criticism is that we're a one-trick pony, which I don't think is fair. We saw yesterday, again, the way that we're attacking with those three-man pods. It's fairly creative. Some line-out variations we saw as well. What's your assessment of the way that the Springboks are evolving?
They've definitely evolved their game from 2019. There's no doubt. 2019, we basically won because of our physicality in defence and aggressive defence, creating turnover opportunities for us to attack. We've definitely grown attacking strings, and going into Sunday's match this year, the Springboks have scored more tries per match on average than any other team, made more line breaks than any other team. So very unfair to be critical of the Springboks attacking play. Look, they're lethal from turnover opportunities, from penalty advantages. If they get the maul going and they decide to put it to the backs, I think their attacking play is going nicely at the moment. In that first half, they'd probably be a bit upset that they didn't convert better. But in that second half, 2 really well taken tries.
Let's talk a little bit about Finn Russell. For me, he was the danger man from Scotland's point of view, but we dealt with him quite well yesterday, I thought, especially in the early moments. There were a lot of up and unders that appeared to target him specifically. I think there were 2 charge down kicks as well in the first, certainly in the first half. We dealt with him well, didn't we?
Yeah, it was noticeable that they sort of kind of swarmed him. They kind of kept constant pressure on him. So he didn't just have the pressure of getting back for ball, but he always had, 2 or 3 Springboks right on him whenever he got that ball. So, very difficult for a fly half like him. If you don't have that front foot ball, if you're not getting protection, I guess he did okay. He did beat the rush defence a couple of times, looked threatening. But when you're so badly beaten up front like Scotland were in that second half, it's going to be very, very difficult for a fly half to stamp his mark on the game.
And then on the negative, we created quite a few opportunities in the first half, but it just seemed like we were let down by lack of execution and maybe a bit of lack of accuracy as well. I grant you that it was the opening match of the tournament and there must have been a few nerves about as well. How much of a concern is that, or is that just the kind of thing that you say, you know what, we got through the opening game, we're up and running, and there's plenty of room for improvement?
It's been incredibly hot and humid in France in this opening weekend of games. So a lot of teams have actually struggled a bit with the handling and the passing. And certainly the Springboks let themselves down a bit in that first half, on attack in the 22, a few balls going to ground, passes not finding the man, that sort of thing. The conditions did make it tough. We can certainly give them an extenuating circumstance there. But yeah, it is something that they'll need to work on to sharpen up, to be more slick with their execution on attack. Sure, I think there probably would have been some nerves. It was a very big first game to start with, a lot riding on that result. So maybe they were a bit jittery at the start. But, having got the result they wanted, a pretty emphatic win. They've now got, some easier fixtures before they play the other really big giants in the pool island. So they've got time now to work on those things to sharpen up and get even better.
Another talking point from the match was Finn Russell's hit on Kurtley Arendse. I must be honest, I was surprised that it wasn't a yellow card. What was your take?
I think it could easily have been a yellow card. Absolutely. It was one of those ones where if he had got yellow, he really couldn't have complained. It was late. It was an absolute shoulder charge. There were no hands used whatsoever. So it was foul play. So yeah, Finn Russell can count himself fortunate not to get a yellow card. I'm kind of happy if the referees veer on the side of rather not sending people off the park if they can. So not hugely unhappy that it wasn't a yellow, but just as long as that consistency now carries through the tournament.
Hey, if you're enjoying this video, why not consider becoming a patron? You can click on my Patreon link, I'll put it on the screen as well as in the description box, and there will be great benefits for members. Let's get back to the interview. And speaking of yellow cards, Jesse Creel perhaps lucky to escape not only not getting a yellow, but maybe even a red. What are the chances that he might be cited in the aftermath?
I don't think much was. I can barely remember it. It was when he made head contact with the guy, didn't he? They were sort of going down to ground, and he, there was a bit of head contact. Nothing much seemed to be made of the incident. So yeah, I don't think anything will come of it. Let's hope, because poor old Jesse Creel missed the last World Cup due to injury. Played a really minor part, injured in the first game. And he's kind of finally got his chance now due to Lukhanyo Um's unfortunate injury. And he's playing great rugby. Let's hope that he can carry on in that vein. And also, of course, South Africa do have a bit of a issue at number 13, so we don't want to lose him.
And then, can I accept that at the time of us recording this video, we might not have the information, but it appeared as if Eben Etzebeth suffered a shoulder injury yesterday. Have you heard any updates on that front?
I haven't. And, it was very weird because he wasn't holding anything or limping, or he looked quite angry to be going off the field, to be honest. Although he does look angry even when he's probably happy, so we don't know. Yeah, I haven't heard anything about the injury. It seems it must be an injury because it would be a very weird strategic move to take, your best lock off the field after 25 minutes. So yeah, we wait and hope that it's nothing too serious. We've got a couple of weeks before we really need Eben, I guess. So hopefully that's plenty of time for him to get over what hopefully is just a niggle.
And then final talking point, Ken, we saw a return of the disco lights last night from Rassie Erasmus. Some in the Northern Hemisphere were not impressed, but you and we saw it when he was at the Cheetahs in 2006 already. What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, they're quite weird lights as well. It's like a red outer globe thing, and then there's a yellow light inside. But looking at it, kind of like not sure. Is that meant to be a yellow light or a red light? Or maybe it's the combination of the yellow in the red. You never know. Russie's got plans within plans, and he's he's a bit of a genius when it comes to these sort of things. I wonder if half of what Rassie Erasmus gets up to is not meant to just annoy the opposition. It's not me. It's just meant to get under their desk and give them something to think about. Get World Rugby up in arms again. So I always worry a little bit about coaches having too much of an influence from off the field. You want to try and keep your players making the big decisions on the field, and sometimes if you're giving them too much information, it actually doesn't help them. But it'll be interesting to see in when the really tight matches come, the tight moments, just how much those signs are used.
And then finally, Ken, just your thoughts on the opening weekend of the 2023 Rugby World Cup?
Yeah, well, starting with the opening game, France All Blacks. Not a great game of rugby, a bit of a grind, but I thought France were very impressive in the second half. They just overwhelmed New Zealand. They just kept them under concerted pressure, kept them in their half, playing much like the Springboks do, to be honest. So, look, New Zealand are certainly not writing them off, but they've got issues. They're against big packs who can dominate them up front. They're struggling to make their mark, and I can't remember Beauden Barrett ever kicking so much from fullback as he did in that game. We know France are going to kick long and deep on you all day long, but why the All Blacks wanted to try and take them on at their own game, I don't know. And so it was a disappointing start for them. I was very disappointed in Argentina. I actually thought that they might have the better of England, but they just didn't pitch up. I haven't heard anyone talking about England's boring rugby. What was it? 6 penalties and 3 drop goals. A try nowhere to be seen. But look, a really good start for England then. That'll restore some confidence after a really tough time they've been through. Australia, they've got an easy pool, comfortable win over Georgia. Ireland, very impressive. I'm a bit surprised they played their sort of first choice team against Romania, but they certainly enjoyed the occasion. And I guess they've laid down a marker. They've showed we are the world's number one side. Here's a score to prove it. So, an interesting first weekend of matches. Looking ahead to the second weekend, perhaps not as many really showpiece fixtures, but potential for a couple of upsets because Australia are playing Fiji, and Fiji are very dangerous at the moment. So Australia will be worried about that one. And England are playing Japan. That's it, Japan. Yeah. So you never know. Japan have pulled off World Cup upsets before, as we know. So that could be a very interesting game as well.
Sounds good to me. Ken, it was lovely having you on Front Row Rugby today. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope that we can have you on again in the future.
Thanks very much, Peter. A pleasure and a privilege to be with you. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much for watching. I've put together a series of other Rugby World Cup related content. I'll put it on the screen for you to go and watch and enjoy as well. See you next time.